We're really going to talk about transfer students. I think that's the biggest, one of the biggest things that we're hearing from our partners right now is how can we grow that transfer class? So today we're going to be looking for some answers, and here are today's questions. How do we increase our speed to lead with transfer students? How do we find them? How do we get them engaged? How do we get them through the funnel as quickly as possible? Two, how can we leverage all the data that we're collecting to reach transfer students in a more meaningful way? Transfer students find themselves on your website at different hours of the morning, in the night, and at different ways of communicating with you. So how are we going to leverage all that data so that we get the right information out in front of, in front of them at the same time? And lastly, how can we re-engage those prospective students who may have chosen another institution, or maybe they left your institution for whatever reason? Life happens, and it's time to bring those students back in. And based upon a lot of the information that we read in the fall, and in talking with our partner institutions, re-engaging those students who have left your campus has also become a pretty big funnel for everybody. So for those of you who are new to CaptureCast, welcome. We are glad that you are here. Just a little bit about Capture. We are a leading enrollment marketing firm that believes that every interaction counts. Every email, every website page, every digital ad, every text message that you send has to be relevant and personal to that prospective student, and making sure that that information gets in front of them when they need it, not when you are ready to provide it. So our mission is simple. Using the higher education's only behavioral intelligence platform, we are the very best at identifying, converting, and enrolling the right students as we go through the process of helping our clients enroll those students. So we do this through the use of the behavioral intelligence platform. It's the only platform that uses real-time data. A team of enrollment experts behind the scenes to run it, and you're going to meet one of those experts today. Our custom relations specialists and a team of data scientists that help our partner institutions navigate this very dynamic and ever-changing higher education recruitment landscape. With one platform, we integrate marketing automation through the entire enrollment lifecycle to make sure that you, as an institution, reach your enrollment goals. So before we bring in our expert, Chase Davis, I want to bring up a quick poll question for everybody. And Sierra, back at headquarters there, if you want to pop in the poll, just tell us how you feel about your current transfer recruitment efforts. Your efforts are focused, segmented, and hitting your benchmarks. We're getting better at it. We've stuck to this is the way we always do it kind of situation, or there's no real plan more than just an organic approach. Students are just walking off the street and coming into you. So it also says the host and the panelists can't vote, Chase. So you're not allowed to vote on this one. But there he is. But as we go through the hi Chase, how are you?
Doing well.
Good. Talking with your partners that you work with on a daily basis, where do you feel some of your partners are lying right now?
It's a great question. I think the pandemic definitely has put transfer and freshman recruitment, really enrollment management, in a different place than it was before. I think that's easily said, easily observed. And so I think that when we're looking at the full industry and that practitioner of enrollment management, is really looking at where are those students coming from. I'm not recruiting them now, but that doesn't mean I don't recruit them later. So how do we do that? And how do we prepare for that in the future? So I think I've got a lot of institutions that are looking forward now and trying to figure out what does that landscape look like for us, looking at freshman students. Where do we
that's
go?
Very, very telling. And if you look at the results of our poll, 63% said they're getting better, but there's still gaps in the approach. And hopefully today we'll give you some ideas and you'll be able to see that. So without further ado, there he is. He's already jumped in. It's Chase Davis, one of our senior enrollment advisors here at Capture Higher Ed. And Chase, I want to thank you again for jumping on today and providing some insight for us as you work with our clients and stuff like that. So, but tell everybody, Chase, about you and your background, and then we'll get started.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to be here. Again, my name is Chase Davis. I'm a senior enrollment advisor here at Capture. And prior to my time here, I actually spent about 12 years on the enrollment management and admissions recruitment side of the house in a seated position across 5 different institutions, and was actually a partner of Captures at 3 different of those institutions as a user of many of our services, and just very excited to be here with the company, but also here talking about transfer recruitment. How are we going to recruit those students? How are we going to enroll those students ultimately? How are we going to get them to graduation? So thanks for having me.
Awesome, Chase. Thanks very much. When it comes to enrollment, we've been reading and seeing overall decline in undergraduate enrollment for the past decade or so. Actually, it's almost 13 years now. But now we've added in the pandemic and the economic downturn expected for 2023, for at least that year anyway. We have this thing called the enrollment cliff that's coming as well. It seems to be like the perfect storm has started to churn up. So colleges, universities around the nation are looking to diversify their enrollment approaches, and higher education is a bit in a bind because of those institutions that can't change curriculum. They can't change their delivery methods, or they can't change their recruiting strategies as quickly. They're going to find themselves on the outside looking in when it comes to enrollment in the future. Chase, when you and the team are working with many different types of institutions, so we have large land grant institutions in our bailiwick, and we also have small private institutions. How much anxiety is out there right now, not only to hit their enrollment goals, but to increase enrollment in a time that it might not be physically possible?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's always that little bit of, I guess we'll call it anxiety, right? When your class comes in the fall and you're trying to look at where you hit goal, where you hit expectation. And so I think, I fell victim to this in the past too, just saying, hey, if we can hit our freshman goal, we'll be there. How does our spring transfer maybe make up that difference? But I think we're starting to need to adjust there and adjust our strategies to thinking that we know that there's going to be a slice of the market who doesn't come in the fall, and we should be thinking already about how are we recruiting them in next year, the year after that, somewhere down the line. So I think that anxiety now has ramped up to the point where it's, well, I've got to have some planning, I've got to have some strategy here, not just, okay, we know we can make up a little bit, but how do we grow it? How do we take it to the next level? So I think that's where you're starting to see this really come to light.
It's interesting because we just got through the midterm elections, and I'm not going to go into politics by any stretch of the imagination. But there were some governors, especially in the Northeast, who were saying we're going to grow enrollment in our state institutions. That's our goal. And then I look at the population demographic shift that's happening right now, and people are moving south to where you are in Florida, where I am in South Carolina, in the droves, getting out of the Northeast and the Midwest, and they're heading out west. But they're also seeing on college campuses. And I want to get your take on this too. There's the Great Resignation as well. We have smaller admissions offices now, or we're fighting for, to get that admissions counselor or to find that leadership as well. There's a gap in leadership as well because you just said it. You were set on a college campus for more than a dozen years. I was on a college campus for more than 25 before I came to Capture, and within the last year and a half, you and I actually started on the same day at Capture, which is pretty cool.
Right.
I feel like there's a kindred spirit here. You're like my brother from Florida, and there's there's a gap in the Great Resignation. Have you seen any of that anxiety amongst the partners and the folks that you're still in contact with around the nation?
Absolutely. And I think the truth is, if we're being truthful about it, that when you start to see a transition turnover in your staff, and you've got to figure out where do you fill those resources, whether it's trying to get more people in or ramping up your partnerships with other people outside of your institution, the resources are going to go to ensure that you're shoring up that main, who's that main student. And for many institutions, that's that incoming first-time freshman. And so I think that's where transfer students kind of get pushed to the background a little bit and are an afterthought, because with the Great Resignation, it's putting a lot of pressure on us to ensure that we are shored up at that freshman recruitment level. So yeah, I think that anxiety level there is starting to tick up too.
That's it's been a tough road. I have some friends who are in the Midwest, and they're just having a hard time filling positions, but they're finding ways to leverage data to make sure that the counselors that they do have, and we'll talk about it later, be able to make the most impact that they can, instead of being on the phone all the time, those kinds of things. So when we talk about building a successful plan, especially for transfers, and this kind of goes from the undergraduate ways, but I want to kind of remind everybody a little bit about how you build that successful plan moving forward. The first thing is, number one, you have to establish goals, and you have to do some research behind it. Having data and knowing where students come from, what types of financial aid they need, those backgrounds, I think is very, very important. But making sure that you're smart about your goal setting, right? Everybody has seen this acronym before, but is it attainable? Does your CFO and your president come down to the enrollment office and say, you know what, Chase, in January, we need to bring in 65 instead of the normal 40. And it's December 3rd. We've had that happen so many times working in private ed. Two, construct appropriate budget. We've always thought about the budgets are always being in a way that, it's focused on undergrad, it's focused on name buys and some digital advertising and travel and things like that. But really, transfers need to have their own budget as well. Make sure that you're budget planning for next year. You might be able to get away with some of it this year, but really for next year, you need to plan what that looks like for your budget. Three, geography. Where and who? Where are you going to find these people? Who are they? Are they local? Are they in-state? Are they regional? Are they international? Where are they? You have to be able to find them. And finally, integrate multiple sources. And I just threw a bunch of different sources that are up here that we've used in the past for obviously undergraduate recruitment and some graduate stuff as well. But this is the main players where you can find find those names anyway, so that you can spend your money accordingly. So, but I think the important thing is that, and it was funny because we were in a meeting about our some data stuff with our data scientist guys, and there's this need for speed that we have. So from the time that we start buying names from Student Search all the way to they apply and they get accepted and stuff like that, there's a need to get information into transfer students as quickly as possible. But the one thing that the data scientist team said is, if they're not visiting your website, they're not coming to your school. So this multi-channel marketing mix brings several channels into a unified strategy so that you are meeting the need of that transfer student when they need it, when they want it, when they're starting that process, so that you grab them and bring them in as quickly as possible. So I think it's an important thing that as you move through this process, and we're going to really dig in here in a second about speed and how you grab those leads, and making sure that you are being efficient in that, and that your budgets are not strained, and that your counselors can be successful in the end. So another way to engage students is through dynamic content on your website. One of the things that we do really, really well here at Captures is use of our PID form. It can do so many different things for you, identifying those students, converting them into your honors program, and you something about or some. So walk us through how this.
Yeah, absolutely. So that point. equivalency. React.
How based upon and that's students some really
Yeah,
cool stuff.
that's for anything. Uh, iron process. If we uh, very important.
Right, especially for specific programs too, because if the student's doing like a 2+2 or a 2+3 and they're getting their master's degree and that whole admissions process is a little bit different, being able to provide that information when it's relevant to the student, I think is super, super important. So great insights
Correct.
there.
Yep.
So when we talk about leveraging data, you want to develop your strategy. And while I would like to say that data is king, it's not. There's an art and science to enrollment management now, and the science is the data, how it's collected, how it's used to ensure that every interaction that you have with a prospective student or family has meaning. Your tech stack gives you the best data so that you can leverage your methods of delivery. We are in a multiple channel universe now, and that channel changes all the time. Sometimes students want email, sometimes they don't. Sometimes students will hit that dynamic content on your website. Sometimes they won't. Sometimes they like that phone call or that text message. Sometimes they won't. And it all changes day to day. And being able to manage that data is really, really important. Having one spot to do that with, whether it's in your tech stack with using our product Engage in the behavioral intelligence platform in combination with your CRM. But it's how you handle that resource is the most important. Your talent, your admissions counselors, and how their interactions will kind of come together and build that relationship for you. But giving your team the ability to know who to talk to, when to talk to them, and the topic is very important to the overall success. So one of the things that we talk about is measure everything all the time. And these are just a couple examples here of some of the deployments that we have on a couple of different websites. One's a pop-up, toaster pop-up, and one's an email, those kinds of things. But if you can't measure it, you can't weaponize it. For lack of a better term, you can't. Your counselors would be flying blind. I remember 25 years ago when I first started, Chase, we got the black book. It was a 3-ring binder, and we had to use paper. There was no such thing as a CRM. There was no such thing as Banner back then, where you could find out where students were. Right? Yeah. See, that's how old I am. Dot matrix was not just a funny joke. That was a reality that we had. So, Chase, when you guys look at some of this dynamic content and you're kind of looking at the different campaigns that are going on and things like that, how are you guys making sure that the counselors know and see all of this information?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, obviously this exists and lives in our dashboard. And so we really like to get all the counselors involved and being able to see what's there and how those campaigns are performing, especially if you have a dedicated transfer rep or a couple of them who are really looking at driving applications and completed applications and providing that, white glove service on credit evaluations. Like, it's really important to get them involved in seeing this dynamic content and seeing the data of how many people have clicked on a campaign and even being delivered the actual records who have clicked a campaign but still have not submitted that transcript for a credit evaluation or completion of an application. It's extremely important to do that. It allows you that power of the data, but then allows your team to come in with that kind of artful approach to the way they have their conversation and getting that transcript in so they can deliver some type of admissions decision, and then also credit evaluations. Yeah.
So, when you're looking at these different interactions you have. So you have your platforms like us and CRMs, Google Analytics, phone calls, text messages, all this other stuff. It used to be on the left-hand side there, it used to be in May, June, July, August, we would sit down, annual review, what worked, what didn't work. We create the strategy, we would recruit and market, and then we would measure again in May. May 1 was always that bellwether, but now we're seeing that data is so much more important that you can do this strategy right now, market and recruit. You can measure it, we can optimize it, measurement, optimize it. You can optimize it if you wanted to. It's not recommended, but you could optimize campaigns, especially digital ad campaigns, every week, every 10 days, every 3 weeks. And it's not very hard to do anymore. And Chase, let me ask you this question, because I know you love the data, because you are the data hound. How has the implementation and the congruency of platforms like behavioral intelligence platform with Engage, married with like Slate and other CRMs, and how's the ability to measure in real time your team's marketing and recruitment efforts help strategy decisions down the road, having that data, but then also thinking about, again, the art piece of it too?
Right. So, having that information daily and at our fingertips within the platform and that connection there between CRMs and then what Capture's doing with our platform, being able to see the records, their status movement, but then being able to match that and marry it to the actual website behavior that we are tracking with Capture is extremely impactful to our ability to be strategic now with campaigns, whether it's digital ad campaigns or dynamic content displaying on the website, but then also planning in small chunks, 5, 10, 15 days in making making an optimization to that campaign so that we're actually using the dollars and what we've invested in for recruitment and transfers quickly. It's not waiting 30 days or maybe 45 days to see how that campaign has worked and is it bringing us applications. We can actually see the interactions with content and campaign today and then see how that matriculates applications the next day or the next 3 days and make an adjustment to those campaigns. And so that connection to CRMs and data is, it's gone from, like you said, years down to months, down to weeks, down to days, and even hours now. So it's extremely important and beneficial.
I was on a call with a prospective client a couple of weeks ago. And we were talking about graduate recruitment, and she asked if we could optimize every day. I said, yeah, but still marketing principles apply. You have to let it work itself for a little bit before you can make an optimization. But the amount of A/B testing that we still do on different emails, that's why we created the behavioral email series, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. But when we look at our data, we looked at 500 million emails before we created the behavioral email series to find out what works, how many words, how many commas, where the piece of content goes, what's the call to action, those kinds of things. So I think it's important that strategy, to your point now, Chase, is becoming more important than ever before, because this is a long game. This is not a short game anymore. The time of 18-month recruitment cycles is over. It's 2 years. It's 3 years. I mean, how many people right now are out there buying freshman names? Freshmen in high school who have signed up, not just to take a test maybe, but maybe who have gotten into like a niche or something like that. And all that data is now coming in. They're going to get recruited. It's kind of a crazy game we're playing right now. So let's talk about re-engagement and finding those transfer students. So a couple of different places that you can find those students right now. So former students who may have left your institution for whatever reason, if they're eligible to come back, a lot of colleges and universities are spending a great deal of time re-engaging with those students to see if they're still interested in possibly coming back, because they made the decision to come at some point in time. Students who may have chosen a different institution and have gone someplace else, but for some reason they keep visiting your website because they've applied already to your institution, may have been accepted, but when it came down to it, maybe they wanted to stay closer to home. Or maybe you're the home school and they decided they wanted to go 3,000 miles away, and they decided, well, maybe that far away isn't a good idea. Maybe I want to be closer to home. Or students who may have chosen to take a gap year. We have a number of students who are taking a gap year right now, especially when COVID hit. And we're still seeing that as a thing, I guess, is that students are definitely taking a gap year and wanting to know when they can come in, how they can come in, and does that change their enrollment status? So, am I missing any? Am I missing any of the funnels, Chase? There.
Oh, I think you're on it right there, Chris.
So one great way to engage with these students is through the behavioral email series. It's different than your normal CRM drip campaign. So remember, the CRM drip campaigns are kind of set it, kind of forget it, that kind of thing. We deliver, it's an improved deliverability. It's about a 97% placement rate of all of our into the student email inboxes, but also provides an experience for the family that was personal, authentic in its messaging. It also is important because it delivers the right message based upon their journey at the right time. So we're able to identify those students and bring those students back into the fray without really hammering them with a ton of content. It's kind of like spoon feeding them, and then all of a sudden here comes more as they show more interest. So my question for you, Chase, when it comes to the use of the email series, the goal is to ultimately drive them to the website, either to apply or at least re-engage with the institution. What are some of the advantages of the BES? Because everyone can do email, but they can't do it well.
Right. I mean, I think identification is a big piece of that. So you mentioned that our BES series is designed there to help identify those students who are receiving that email, so that when they click that link in the email and they come back to the website, now we know who they are, and we can also layer our dynamic content up against that BES series. So I think that that's really important in terms of the email communication. But we also, we understand how students work. Sometimes they just are not going to engage with that email, and so we are upfront about that. Hey, maybe you don't want this series, you can unsubscribe. So we get that in there. And then at the same time, when it's kind of wearing out, we'll tell them, hey, we understand you're not interested, but if there's one last shot, give us a chance. And we get a lot of clicks on that email because they go, oh, you know what, I just haven't had time. I see them in the backlog there. Now I'm clicking it. Now I'm moving into more content and I understand what I'm getting into. So I think that's those are huge benefits to what we do on the BES series. And then also just that layering effect with other services that we provide and some of the data intelligence that we provide.
I think arming transfer counselors with information about students who are coming back to engage with that campus, and we're also able to identify the campus that they're currently at too, which is kind of interesting. So, if you're looking to grow in different places, and we'll talk about that here in some of the Google stuff, but for us to be able to identify the .edu where that student is can also lead us into some digital advertising pieces, which is where we're going now. To determine the location-based placement with different types of search as we go through it. So there are several segments, and we're going to talk a little bit about each one of them. But marketing folks always say it's about location, location, location. So when it comes to search, I think one of the things that we need to talk about is where are those students coming from? You have those top transfer schools, whether it's a 2-year school or maybe it's a large public school if you're a private school, and that's where you typically would get most of your transfer students. But on average, it takes about 8 touch points, someone viewing and engaging with 8 pieces of marketing to convert into an inquiry, to schedule a visit, to apply, those kinds of things. So being able to serve that ad in a way that is in a geographic location to your top transfer schools will increase those touch points for you. It focuses in where that money is being spent. And I also think it helps out when they're actively researching your institution to be able to reinforce your message that you have. So they hit your website 2 days later, here comes a specific ad that we're able to serve to them. So Chase, when you guys are talking about helping with the placement of these types of ads and marketing spend, really over the next couple of slides, we're going to really talk about, how institutions can really place themselves in different places. But are institutions starting to look beyond the traditional schools and geography for transfer students? What's the expansion look like right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think those are your traditional ways that you go, right? Whatever schools that we've received students from before, where are competitors? Where did my non-matriculants go for my freshman class? That's pretty clear cut there. But there are other areas to get into, and I think institutions starting to get smart with this. But with the pandemic, there were some who opted not to go to college right out of college, right out of high school, or decided to go to a community college and work full time and do some of those things. I think there you start to get into geographic locations that are around businesses, right? Different areas where your students may have gotten into a place where they could start a career or a job, and now maybe looking to go back to school. And I think that if you're an institution that can serve that type of student, looking more geographically to where those businesses and where those potential prospects are in their workplace, that's a new place for us to get into. I also think that with these types of Google ads, and as you look into targeting options and things like that with your digital ads, going back and looking at maybe new majors that you've brought on board since prior to the pandemic, when some of those students opted out of the college going process. And so looking at any of those new that you have and going back in time to when those students in 2020 were in high school, maybe you didn't buy those names, maybe you didn't look at those. So now we need to look at where did those students go off because you didn't have that major. So from a transfer perspective, that's 2 or 3 years ago, but now you have something to offer them. So now it opens up a new realm of colleges to kind of hit there.
Well, I think that's why the Clearinghouse data is so important to have that every
Absolutely.
year. I can tell you horror stories about presidents coming to my office saying, well, these are our top 5 schools that we cross app with. I'm like, really? Are you sure? And then you pull the data and you show them that, 60% of the time you were right. But here's these 3 schools that are stealing students from us. And we need to combat that with messaging or financial aid or, travel or things like that. So when we talk about the harnessing of the power of list-based digital targeting in our final minutes here, Again, taking those lists that you just talked about, Chase, whether we just purchased that list or we had that list from 2 or 3 years ago and we're retargeting that information, those search lists can be retargeted again, and segmented out. So you could segment them by program. You could segment them by where they went to school. If they went to the 2-year school and they're in a certain major now, you can look at it financial aid wise. You can look at it athletically now too. There's all these different ways of doing that, but segmenting your transfer students, and those lists are small, right? They're not. If you had 10,000 inquiry in a transfer pool per year, that'd be outstanding, right? But nobody has that. So being able to be very personalized, and focused on that segment with that messaging will garner fruit. But you have to set those things in place. And like we talked about before, planning and strategy is everything. And having people there who know what's going on in the world and how it's working, I think is really, really important. And as we look at prospect and new future students with lookalike audiences too, I think that's something new because everybody's looking to branch out. If we go back to slide 3 or 4, where we saw that map, and that map has a lot of different colors all over it, people are moving around. But you're able to create lookalike audiences through Google, but also through the platform as well, finding students who are like students, and creating those lookalike inquiry pools to go after that. So I think it's important that we take advantage of managed services, Chase, to be quite honest with you. And I don't want to say this is a shameless plug because I know that I had Capture on 3 campuses that I worked at too. But being able to turn to somebody and say, Chase, this doesn't make sense to me. Can you help me through this? Can you help me walk through this? When it comes to monitoring campaigns and optimizing current, and we kind of talked about this a little bit, but these new lists of students, how important is it that we can move our campaigns and find those pockets of students and get those resources in the area now more than ever? How important is that?
It's extremely important. I mean, that's part of the reason why we have the data at your fingertips, right? So not only for us as those who are managing the services, but for partners to be able to see and look at those and help build out those strategies. So from the beginning, when we're launching digital ad campaigns, looking for the right type of lookalike audience. You can have the standard ones, anybody who didn't or had applied before. We want students who look like those students, have the same interests. But maybe even looking at the engagement within our platform, those students who had a high affinity score, so our CAI score. If you're a partner of ours, you're probably familiar with that. But those in a 75 or above range and maybe in matriculated, this is an even more targeted type of student who's engaging with the website, using that as a lookalike audience to build out some of your Google campaigns as you're looking to target those transfer students or any other audience too. So that's part of what we do in my role, is making sure that we're looking at the data and thinking very critically about how we can use that and leverage it in setting some of these campaigns and strategies.
Perfect. That leads us right into this next one. So when we bring it all together, Chase, and we think about the machine that is recruitment now, there's a ton of data out there. Everybody has it. Some people don't know what to do with it. Some people just are overwhelmed with it. Drinking out of a 4-inch fire hose that's on high. There's a ton of data out there, but having those digital strategies, and that strategy talk with experts like you in the field who not only see what that campus is going through, but what your other clients are going through too. And as a former client myself, I really enjoyed my conversations with Gretchen, who was another one of our account executives. And I would say, what else is going on out there? What am I missing? What can I be doing? What's happening in the other states? Those kinds of things. Being able to have that conversation is huge. Being able to measure student behavior then can really drive a few things. First, your marketing spend, right? Where you're going to spend it, how you're going to spend it, how do you optimize your digital ad spend so you're not blowing your budget?